Welcome to Shakin, where we provide the platform for entrepreneurs and thought leaders to share their stories in order to hopefully influence others to get out of the rat race and chase their own dreams. If you have any recommendations for guests or questions that you want to be asked, please don't hesitate to reach out. Anyways, if you enjoy the podcast, please like, comment, subscribe, and share in order to keep the podcast growing. Otherwise, I'm your host, Jack Moran, and this is Shakin Hands. If you're looking for business mentorship, I have a place where you can get feedback on your unique personal development and business growth challenges. Over the last year, I've brought together a group of impact-driven thought leaders where we meet every single day to discuss psychology, communication, mindset, and business case studies. We have people who have made millions of dollars, lost millions of dollars, Harvard MBAs, and new entrepreneurs like you and I. Entrepreneurship can be lonely, so if you're looking for a support system, please follow the link in the description below for some more information. In Denver, the entrepreneurship community has been surprisingly pretty prevalent.
Yeah.
And it's pretty...
To my surprise too.
It's kind of got a hippie culture, which I like.
It does.
A lot of holistic entrepreneurs.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. Caitlin definitely falls into that too.
Well, what's her deal?
She owns a marketing agency that's newer. But then she's also a holistic business coach.
I saw that on her Instagram, but I don't know what that means.
I think it's more spiritually based.
Okay.
And full person. It's definitely not X plus Y equals Z, A plus B equals C mentality. I think it's very free flowing and very kind of I guess for lack of a better term, spirit led and just really connecting to you as a whole person and making sure that's reflected in your business rather than separating you from your brand.
And I think people have a false illusion that you can separate the two.
No.
It is an extension of your lifestyle.
Exactly.
So when you have the ability to blur that line and realize that it is just an extension, then.
Yeah. Well, and I think when you try to, people sniff it out. And it either feels maybe somewhat inauthentic or maybe just a little cold.
Right.
At least that's how I perceive it and I've noticed it even in myself when I try and do that.
What have you got going on right now? What do you do? What's your deal?
Yeah, I got a lot of deals.
Cool.
I feel it's been a few years in the making though, because I started with also out in finance, and that's what I studied in college, that in real estate. And then I was that is not going to work for me. So I knew I needed something mission driven. So eventually, after a long story of events that led me here, I was I have almost 10 years experience in mentoring these kids at my university. I've seen so much transformation in them. What if I started a life coaching and I wanted to focus on specific purpose and creativity coaching. And I was so I'm going to do that. And it took me about 6 months to actually start taking steps towards it. So I have that, which is what I just launched in December. And then I've also been writing a book for almost 2 years. And Caitlin's actually been helping me out with that a little bit.
What's the book about?
So it's part memoir style and part guided journal, I would say. And a lot of it is mixing anecdotes and research and spiritual concepts. And then guided journal prompts, probably 5 to 10 per category, and there's 52. And it's designed for theoretically younger women in their 20s, obstacles that they face and kind of how to overcome that and avoid it and kind of tap into a more authentic and confident version of yourself as a younger person. High school, college, not just waiting to do it in your later 20s once things have fallen apart. If you see them maybe starting going off the rails, here's experience from someone who let them a couple times veer back on course and just really be a big sisterly comforting resource that I guess I wish I'd had.
It's something that they can relate to and that gives them some practices as well.
Exactly. I wanted it to be practical but also emotional and comforting and relatable, kind of all the things in that world.
You said there was a bunch of events that led you from the finance gig into what you're doing now. What was kind of that backstory?
Yeah. There were a lot. I think I knew, one, I'm such a nerd. So in college, I just loved
Me too.
learning. I was so happy to be there. And it was the first time where I really, because I grew up in a pretty strict and religious household. So getting to kind of expand all of my beliefs and like fly a little bit was really exciting. So I didn't put as much thought into, okay, am I really doing this because it's what I want to be doing or something I think I should be doing? Because I knew I liked business. And like even when I was a kid, I like had this game called The Boss with my dad, where I like wasn't trying to be bossy, but I just made up a list of tasks and like figured out like mechanisms for him to like deliver them out even in our little house. And I was like, that was probably my first sign entrepreneurship would work for me because I was like 5.
You were building SOPs in your house?
Yeah,
That's so
exactly.
that's so nice.
But then like with finance, once I got to the point of interning, I really liked the first one I did. But what I also didn't realize that clicked until later was that I was working with a bunch of entrepreneurs in that sector of the bank. And I thought that that was so cool. And I loved like working with mom and pop shop owners who had owned businesses for like 30, 40 years and like learning from their experiences. But then I switched into like a real estate investment trust finance. And I was like, this could not reflect me less. And I took an internship and then I actually graduated during 2020, the spring of COVID.
Okay.
So because I had gotten a job offer like a year in advance, I was like, this is just, it's safe. Like, I don't know what's going to happen with COVID. I'll take it. And then I felt drained like every day for 2 years and sad. And I was just around a lot of people who were young, but it seemed like they had really given up on so many of their dreams. Cause some people like that is a skill set that fits them. They actually are passionate like about math and like real estate. And I could see that difference, but none of those people were really on my team. And I saw like in other parts of the bank, but I was just like being around people who really have no vision for their life beyond like next weekend was just like inauthentic and kind of bummed me out. So I was like, and my best friend and I, who had like done like a COVID quarantine group together, we'd gone on this like whole spiritual awakening journey during, like the year leading up to me taking that job. And
What was that about?
um, it was like truly like right when COVID hit and we were up in Boulder and we had an apartment with a view of the Flatirons and we were hiking every day. We were like,
Oh,
and
so
she
this was
was
your own like journey. It wasn't like a
this,
course or something that you took.
no, yeah, this was our own journey that we kind of have been on now together for like about 5 years, which is cool.
Awesome.
Yeah, but we both just started thinking there has to be more than what we're on track for. It didn't stop us from necessarily taking steps in those directions. She also went down the real estate route for a couple of years and now she writes musicals. So
Wow.
it's never too late to change your mind. But yeah, so I think that just that journey kind of made it too hard to ignore that like underlying unsettledness that things weren't really where they should be. And also neither one of us had ever moved out of Colorado. I knew I needed a job that would allow me to do that. And I had to go back into the office every day after like the first year of COVID, or at least like 4 times a week. So I was like, I need more freedom. And I think that was also a sign I was meant to be an entrepreneur. And I actually then was like, you know what, I'm just going to quit without a job and see where that lets me land.
Hell yeah.
And I
Dove in the
moved
deep
in.
end.
I did, and I just applied for everything under the sun that did resonate, and I lived with my parents for the summer. And then I got this offer after like a lot of rounds of interviews, but for a startup that I ended up working for. And I was like, I'm going to use this opportunity to learn what I like about running a business, what I don't, and what I might see in other people that like I would change for my own when I do that someday. I just didn't think it would be so soon once I kind of took that step.
So what did you learn from that experience? What were those insights that you took away?
From the startup part specifically,
Yeah,
or from the
startup?
Yeah, actually, I realized too, because I feel like I've done a lot of like healing work that's led me to this point where I have an abundance mentality and have like a much healthier relationship with money than I did maybe when I was younger. But what I realized about money in the context of a company and an organization is that it can change people when it's not handled the right way. Like I absolutely loved everything that the company stood for when I was hired on there. And like they had a huge sustainability focus and social justice movement going. But the company was very small. It was only like the 17th employee, I think. And when they got a massive like private equity investment, the culture shifted pretty rapidly. And I realized that they were willing to sacrifice morals and actually unintentionally, I think, because I know that they were good people, but like harm the people that they were trying to help and cost the money when they were supposed to save the money. And with that, I was like, I know that no matter what happens, I'd rather have to completely let my business fold than like compromise my integrity.
Mhm.
And that was definitely like a huge insight. And actually like a book that I read somewhat recently called Give and Take, I think is, yeah, that's the title. I wish I remembered the author's name. Um, but it really talks about how givers, although versus takers versus matchers. And takers are typically people that, whether in a business or personal or et cetera setting, like they typically just live their life for their own gain. Not necessarily that they're like bad people, just more like inherently a little bit more on the selfish side. And then matchers are more like, all right, let's like exchange here and not just give freely without expectation. Um, and I think reading especially about the givers and about how they typically are more successful and like all of this like research went into it and all of these studies, and even it talked about Abraham Lincoln, about how much he was willing to put up with and sacrifice and be patient for before he got to the point of being president, um, was really eye-opening, because I realized that, wow, there are really successful business people especially who have only like given and want to mentor people and like do it out of the goodness of their heart. And sometimes it takes them longer because people take advantage of them, but it's not like they're unaware of that. And I realized there was a lot of kind of taking and matching also happening at that company, and that just wasn't what I aligned with. And that I always want to make sure I'm like giving the most that I can without obviously like overextending. You have to have boundaries in place too. But those were probably the top two takeaways I had.
Yeah, that's a good point. Like people don't realize, and I see it pretty often. I like that, the concept of givers, takers, and matchers.
Yeah,
They want that instant gratification,
exactly.
but it's counterproductive. It's like you don't get the compounding effect of relationships, like by
No,
not giving. And I think that when you start by giving, and there's a balance. You can't just like always give. You have to at some point like say what's in it for me.
exactly.
There is a balance, but it's like I think Alex Hormozy says it's like 70-30. You got to be giving 70 and like taking
Hmm.
30. The people who are 50-50 are transactional, and then the takers, obviously, like you can just read right through them immediately.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. You said you go ahead.
I was actually just gonna say that that concept resonated recently when I was reading a book kind of like for my coaching and like coaching sales practice. It's called The Prosperous Coach by Rich Litvin and Steve Chandler, I believe.
I love the book.
Oh,
Recommends.
yeah. I was about to say, like, have you read it?
No, no. But I always note them down when people mention books. And
But and they didn't, or at least I'm only like maybe like a third of the way into it now. But I think they unintentionally were actually capturing this concept because they talk about how you don't like acquire a client or just like passively attract it through like manifesting or like spiritual means. Like there's a lot of active engagement that has to occur to get the right clients in your world. But a lot of it I realized was actually about giving in it because their philosophy just has to do with building relationships and like formulating really high quality conversation and inquiring about the people that you're trying to help before you try and like push a sale. Because I think like, and also there's a short lifespan between like either like an event and action. So like they meet you, you really connect, and then them actually being willing to like take the action and like sign up for your coaching or like show like true interest in it. And I was like, even that where it's not just a tactic, they actually just want to engage in meaningful conversation with the people that they're trying to help and then build lasting relationships. Because then when people have that trust with you, they're actually going to want to be more vulnerable and take more action and transform themselves more. And I was like, that just, even when people don't realize what the concept is, I think the people who have found the most success are doing that, whether like consciously or not.
yeah, and it's like people are aware of energy. And like
Absolutely.
when you go into a sale, for instance, and your intention is just the transaction,
Yeah.
like people are going to pick up on that. And a sale is just a person. When you execute a sale, it's just somebody changing from something they're not doing to doing something that you're offering. So to influence that change, you have to build trust with them, and you're not going to build trust with them if you're giving that energy of like, I just want the transaction. I'm just thinking of my own self-interest. So you have to have the ability to like step outside of your own needs and wants and like put yourself in and it's not just sales, it's like anything in life, it's communication. Like you
Yes.
really have to, if you want to connect with people and build relationships, you have to be able to step out of your own needs and wants and put yourself in their shoes and like
Yeah.
think in their world. And that's when you're going to make that match and connect.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree more. And I mean, especially that's why I got into this whole thing was to be of service and like serve people and like be the resource I wish I'd had. And like you just people would be able to tell like when you're losing sight of that. So it's like why even bother trying to fake it or force it or it can come off like a little desperate too, like unintentionally. I mean, there might be times I'm sure as you know as an entrepreneur when like things are tighter and like there are fluctuations, but you just have to know that you're in it for a reason and not be willing to give up on that.
Yeah, and relationships are super sensitive and they require a lot of upkeep. Like you
They do
can't
a lot of
neglect
time.
them. Yeah. What is your like the problem that you are solving through your service offerings?
Yeah, that's a great question. I would say if I had to distill it down to just kind of one area, it would really be a lack of fulfillment. Um, and I mean, that's oversimplifying it a little bit, but there, I even realize it in my own life, whether like my family who are of people of older generations who are like, you don't necessarily have to be happy with what you do. Like that's what people in your life are for. And hobbies. And I definitely don't disagree with that. I think there's a lot of merit to the notion of like working a job, especially if it doesn't require too much of you that you're not obsessed with. Um, but you can handle and that like it stabilizes you and supports other things you're passionate about. But what I realize is how many people just feel like they've completely lost touch with like who they were as a child and not just like dreaming without any sort of action or any sort of skill set that might support that. Um, but I think just seeing how draining and I think I even view life through the lens of like, this is also maybe an oversimplification, but like, is something expansive or contractive? And I see just a lot of people who contract for a lot of years and like get very small and like just, I want them to remember, and this is where the creativity part of my coaching comes in. It's not just for artists, although I would consider myself a creative and I feel like I have skill sets to help other people like unblock themselves in that way. But a lot of it is just creative thinking and like being able to like solve problems more creatively and be like, okay, let me take like a different approach to maybe making friends if I'm unfulfilled in like my relationships. Or I feel like I've outgrown my community and I'm not really sure how to redesign it. It can be like that or in romantic relationships, and then especially like in their life purpose. I want people to feel empowered to explore different things. Obviously, you don't have to take massive risks, like especially like if finances are an issue, like you can be smart about it while still relearning how to like invoke that childlike play and joy and like try things just because they sound interesting. And maybe you'll realize, oh, I have a passion for that. What if I did want to make a career shift or just make that a more integrated part of my life? Um, and so, yeah, that's like at the base level. I hope that all makes sense. Kind of what I'm trying to,
Tracking.
yeah, what I'm trying to solve. I want people to feel more empowered. I want them to feel more in touch with their true selves. Like they're living life on purpose. I don't think the word purpose is just one thing that you do. I think it's a lot of facets of your personality and how you serve the world and your community and the people closest to you. And if I can be of service to help people do more of that, then I'm a happy woman.
So if I come to you as a client and I'm like, I really don't know what I'm doing with my life. I don't even have a direction.
Yeah.
Like I don't even know what I'm working towards. How do you work like in practice? What is the methodology to get me to a point where I can have that insight to start formulating that direction and that path for myself?
Yeah, that's a great question. And this is like a core component of my work and how I approach it. But the concept of reconnecting with your intuition and like going through a series of like basic spirituality practices because I do and I always want to work with people of a variety of spiritual beliefs. I think it's kind of important that they have some so that we're able to connect on that level because that is part of my framework. But no matter kind of what religious or spiritual background you come from, I think recognizing what that voice of your intuition looks like, how to connect with it, and how to even like feel that in your body, and be able to embody when something is right for you and learn what that feels like is a really key foundational component because you're not gonna know what's wrong for you if you can't even like hear that voice or like feel those physical sensations like telling you that it is. Because if anything, I think a lot of things in life can be right for you. And it's great to have the willingness and curiosity to go explore and try them. And that's also a key component of my framework. And like using even just something as simple as like SMART goals, so that they're like measurable, it's easy to take action and kind of distill them into different categories and make them feel feasible. That's kind of like a phase two. And a lot of that does involve kind of going out there and trying new things. Like to your point, if someone's feeling really lost and they just don't know where to start, I'm like, okay, what made you light up with excitement when you were like 10? What did in high school? What did even just like 2 years ago that you have a really fond memory of? And you're like, wow, that was a great time. Let's go do a little bit more of that. And then kind of do some reflective and prompting exercises, see where that leads you.
So what would be like a good intro maybe for someone like watching this episode?
Yeah.
If they're like, I want to tap into my authentic self and find my authentic self, but it's been lost and I don't even know who that is. Like,
Yeah.
what would be like a framework or like a practice that they could just implement even like quickly to just kind of
Yeah.
see that this kind of stuff works? Or
This one is super easy and tangible. It actually came from one of my favorite books I've ever read. It's also filled with exercises. Sorry, I'm just like the book recommendation queen
I
today.
love that.
It's
What's the
called
book?
The Artist's Way,
Okay.
and it's actually meant to take probably like 5-6 months, even upwards of a year, depending on how quickly you go through it. But the practice is called morning pages, and it's literally just 3 pages filled up in your journal. Everyone get a journal. You need it. Even if you're not a writer, even if you don't know what to say, you could be like, potatoes, the sky is blue, like literally anything to start getting thoughts flowing, that simple. And then just fill up 3 pages every day and then reread them. You're like the next day before you start doing the next one, you're gonna start realizing so much about what is in your subconscious that you don't give yourself the time of day to think about, whether you're scared to, whether it's just uncomfortable, even when you start to.
So there's no structure to the 3
There's
pages, just whatever's coming
no
up.
structure, just whatever is coming out, like a pure brain dump, which I mean, that's like another term for it, but you can start adding structure over time. I think even if you're interested in like Pinterest and now we have ChatGPT, like there are lots of ways to formulate really guided journal prompts. And I think that's a really good second step. Especially maybe on days when like you do feel really stuck, it's okay to like venture out into that. But I think it's a really good challenge to start learning about all of the intricacies of your subconscious just through brain dumping, for those 3 pages, and make it a habit, like build it up over a few weeks, a few months, and make it more of a lifestyle. And I think you'll start learning a lot more about yourself and what's working and what's not.
So you read, when you reread it, is it right after you write it or is it before you write the next one the next day?
Before I write the next one the next day, because I want to give myself, and I don't even know if this part was in the book, but I just do it for me, and I think it's really helpful. Because I want to have more of an objective lens when I read it versus like an emotional one that might be attached to it in the moment or that day. I think it's nice to feel more removed from it because that's where the insights come in. I think is when you're seeing it almost as like, it feels like an objective third party, even just after like 24 hours.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's great advice. You said you learned like a lot from this healing journey that kind of led you down this path. What was that like? What was that about?
Ooh, very multifaceted for sure. I mean, I don't even know where to begin. I mean, I definitely, like, I had a pretty tumultuous childhood. And I think one of the biggest realizations and pivot points that I had on this healing journey was that I was never gonna let myself feel like a victim because of that. And like, I knew that I had developed certain patterns I wasn't happy with as a result. But as an adult, like, at that point, it's not anyone else's fault but your own to continue it, no matter where they stemmed from. And so I was like, it's gonna hold me back from starting a business. It's gonna hold me back from being surrounded by the type of people that are gonna like love me well and that I can pour into, and where that's gonna be reciprocated, and myriad of other things. But just almost turning on like an empowerment switch and being like, wow, it doesn't matter what happened to me. And like, I give myself kudos for working through it, and I still do. It's not a linear journey. And then also like bringing spirituality back into it in like a new and reformed way was really healing in and of itself. Um, Because some people have really positive experiences with like organized religion, even as in their upbringing. Unfortunately, like that wasn't my case, and that's okay. But realizing like, oh, there can be, even if it turns out it's all in my head, but it's comforting, that's okay. If there's just more love and like loving forces in the world that are able to change my perspective and make me want to produce more of that for others in my life, that's huge. And I don't have to do things a certain way just because I learned them that way. So yeah, I think just kind of taking my power back, like really forgiving anything and everything that had gone wrong, um, and then learning, okay, what's going to hold me back from developing the life that I dream of? And then like starting to work on those and using spirituality as like a mechanism to, it doesn't always make your days perfect or it's not always sunshine and rainbows, but it helps at least me with the self-awareness aspect of it as well.
What are kind of like the habits that you've learned or you've had to implement into your life that have led to the consistency and the success and the happiness?
Ooh, many, and it's definitely a bit of a roller coaster journey. Sometimes you have to throw things out, bring in new ones, but I would say the journaling, I know we touched on it, but that's definitely huge. I mean, I'm a writer in general, but um, I love to get creative with it, or I love to be like silly with it. It feels like a purely unfiltered place where I can just be me. And I think that even triggers a thought of I just want to be in places where I can be the most raw, vulnerable, authentic, silly, goofy, serious, existential version of myself, and seek out more places like that. And then also meditation. I'm not great with it. I have ADHD and just like a lot of fun thoughts going on in there at all times, but it really does help quiet my mind. And I just do it for my goal every day is only 5 minutes because that feels, and I think there are studies done that show even 2 to 3 minutes can make an impact, even if more marginal. And just doing that, it really does help reduce the chatter. And sometimes you kind of get maybe like phrases you think of or a new idea pops in and you're like, oh wow, I hadn't quieted my mind long enough to allow that in before. And then, if I have a day where one, I have the time and two, I have the bandwidth mentally, I might extend it and do another 5 or 10 minutes. And then like branch into like a visualization. And that is like more of a once a week, twice a month goal is to do a longer visualization. Cause to your point about the consistency and success, the more detail oriented you are about the things that you want to become reality in your life, I think when you're envisioning them, I think it heightens the likelihood that they'll actually be manifested into reality, and that you'll want to put in the work to make them arrive.
Agreed.
Yeah.
What has been the hardest day in your entrepreneurial journey thus far?
Mm. There are probably, I think, and it might sound silly, but it was like even right after I launched last month. And it was twofold. One, I had never had to use social media as a means of like education or to like be seen for me. Cause, as a full circle moment, what we were saying earlier, you can't really separate the person from the brand. And I was trying to because I was afraid of being seen by so many people. And granted, so many is relative. At that point, I had like 10 followers on my new account. But it was just the concept. And so realizing that if I really wanted to build the type of community that I dream of, and not just through social media, but like in-person events and like all these other aspects of my business that I'm trying to build, I have to release that fear. Um, and I have to just like keep showing up courageously. And to that point, like around the same time, I also had my first prospect that I was really excited about as potentially being a client, like ghost me, and which is so silly. That happens all the time. And I'm not worried about continuing to put myself out there and drawing in the right people. But it was just the first time, and I think I had all this build up for like the better part of a year, especially after leaving like my startup job last summer. I was like, wow, the second I launch, the floodgates are open. Everyone's just gonna be coming in, and it was not that way. And just having that reality check, I think was humbling in a good way because it was almost like a test of like, okay, are you going to rise up and like maybe work on some things in your business and marketing and seek out more mentorship that aren't working? Or are you just going to lie down because you're scared, and you don't want to see what's on the other side and you're afraid that you're essentially afraid of rejection. And that wasn't really something I worried about in my personal life for a long time or in my career. So having to like sit with those feelings again was almost new. I mean, you feel that maybe as a kid, but it's different to feel that when like your livelihood is at stake. So I would say that was probably around the same day. And it was the toughest.
How have you figured out how to source clients now effectively?
Yeah, I mean, it's still very new, obviously, and it's an ongoing journey. And I knew one thing that was going to be really important for me was in-person connection. I'm someone that I feel like picks up on energy and is very sensitive to it. And I can also kind of sense, not to say you can't over like Zoom and everything, you most definitely can, and through Instagram, and I love connecting through those mediums as well. And I actually worked through this in my mastermind group, but I needed to do a lot of in-person networking, and that was going to take a lot of my time, and I was going to have to feel or like recognize what I feel drawn to and be willing to like maybe drive some distances for it and really invest in it. And that has already been so fruitful, even just in like a month's time. I'm not even like, especially since the new year, I was like, I'm going to do like 10 networking in-person events this month. And just the caliber of people and like prospective clients that I've been connecting with. One, it just like makes my heart so happy because that was what I dreamed of. And then just like the feeling and the comfort of being around so many like-minded people like that who really inspire each other, even in like an hour and a half's time frame, is like it's just producing a series of pinch me moments. And I would say that's probably the most effective. I think I've gotten a few referrals from people that I know. Um, I think it's a little harder for them to be objective about what that person might be ready for versus what I can tell they're ready for. Because someone's only gonna, I always say they're not investing in me, they're investing in themselves. And some people just aren't ready to do that, and that's okay. Or they might view it more as like therapy versus true coaching. Um, and so also learning how to say no has been an important part of that as well when the fit's just not right or the timing might not be right for whatever reason. So just focusing on those in-person events and being deliberate with my decisions.
How are you filtering out what's a good client, what's not, or what's like, I mean, even outside of business, what's like a good person that you want to have in your life versus not having in your life?
Ooh, that's really good. That's a great question. I think one is, I guess, what work have you done or are you doing on yourself? And not necessarily saying that you had like a really traumatic past or anything, but just are you self-aware about like your downfalls and like, but also what you bring to the table? And are you actively trying to do more of that in your life? Do you feel happy and content with what your life looks like on a day-to-day basis? Like, are you inquisitive? Are you kind? And it kind of comes back almost a little bit to that giver, taker, matcher concept and ideology where are you trying to become friends with someone or even like get coached or whatever the context may be just because you're trying to get something from them rather than actually invest in and pour into yourself, but then also give that back out into the world as a result. That's really important to me. I think, and while definitely not a deal breaker in any area of my life, I think I do connect with people who have some sort of like spiritual baseline, even if it's just like they love like meditating or like find solace in nature, like kind of connecting on those things because I think it's a big relatability point for me and something that didn't used to be that important to me, but now I realize how powerful it can be when people of that mindset like all connect together. So I would say those are kind of some of the top things I look for.
You were saying that like you're a very creative person.
Yeah.
How, as a creative,
Hmm.
do you not let like the business influence that natural raw creativity? Because obviously when you have like responsibilities like bills and liabilities,
Yeah.
that can sometimes influence your decision making. But how do you keep that creativity authentic while still managing a business?
Mm, that is a great question, and to be honest, it's something. It's probably one of my biggest pain and growth points right now, because I think the creative in me, and it's such a stereotype, but unfortunately, it does fit my description a little bit, where I just kind of want to follow. It's like shiny object syndrome, I guess is how you could put it, where you just want to follow the next best thing, and like you get a rush of creative insight, and you're like, I gotta go follow that and see where it leads me today. But then I realized, okay, well, then I didn't get maybe 60, 70% of the things done I was supposed to. And is this actually going to facilitate growth in my business or even a creative project that is important that I have come to fruition? So one kind of safeguard I've been putting in place, even just in the last couple weeks, is designating days of the week where I've kind of, and this journaling has actually helped me with this, but taking stock of days of the week where I feel like I'm in a little bit more like administrative business left brain mindset versus ones where I feel more creative rushes. Because I don't know if it's like just years in corporate and structure or whatever, but I do notice there are different weekdays where I kind of feel that. And then also giving myself permission to fully play at least one weekend day. Like as a new entrepreneur, there's a lot of work I do have to get done on weekends, but taking one full day off to just like do things that I enjoy and hang out with people I love helps get that out of me and gives me like the freedom so that I don't feel constricted. But yeah, designating days of the week to work on certain types of tasks and like having a couple be more creative and like the other three be more like client consultations and administrative work and website updates has actually already really helped me find more balance in that way.
And I can definitely deal with that too, like the shiny object syndrome.
Yeah.
And I think I've tried to, or I've solved that problem by just staying very focused on my overarching goal and making sure that my decisions are aligned with that overarching goal. So again, I might get inspiration to do something that's not my core business. And maybe that does have alignment with my overarching goal, but maybe spending the time on that is having less of an impact on my overarching goal than being focused on my core business. So I have to kind of weigh those things. But there are also times where, like, taking those self-care days, although it is taking away time from my core business, I could put 40 days in a row on my core business, but then if I burn out and I am in a hole or depressed for a week because I'm burnt out,
Yeah.
it's like, was that sustainable? No. So you have to like kind of weigh everything else out and say like, what are the conditions in my environment that are gonna set me up to achieve the things that I want, and make sure that
Absolutely.
all those decisions are congruent with the end goal that I desire.
Well, that's such a great point, and I'm curious if you have any kind of methodologies that you found or even just something like having a notes app where you jot down those new inspirational ideas that kind of allow you to pursue them when you have the time, but don't detract you from your tasks that, to your point, need to go towards your aligned larger goal.
Yeah, so one of my New Year's resolutions is to be a lot more intentional about my surroundings, because someone with like that has ADD, and I'm sure you saying the same relates to this, but if it's in my line of sight, it can be a distraction, So I have to be intentional about what is in my line of sight. Like, and if I can be intentional about those surroundings and make sure that everything in my line of sight, in my environment, is aligned with my overarching goal, then if I do get distracted by something or if my attention does move, it's to things that are all congruent with that end goal. So that's like one thing, is being intentional, um, intentional about my surroundings. I do rely on to-do lists a lot to keep me focused and just give me a plan, because, you know, there are times, and I'm sure you experience this, where you're kind of like popping with creativity. Sometimes for me, it's like when I'm trying to go to sleep, my mind will start racing.
Yeah.
And what I've learned from one of my mentors, it's super important to like document those things. So, because I'll come up with all these great ideas and I'll start working through the chains and like solving problems and like visualizing these steps that I need to go through and these plans that I need to go through. And then I'll go to sleep and I'll wake up in the morning and I kind of remember what I was thinking about, but I'm not at the level that I was that night before. So if I don't document those things down, like, you kind of lose that inspiration. So putting together a to-do list or an action plan, once you have that creative insight, has been super helpful to me to like actually be able to implement that plan.
That's a pretty brilliant idea too, because I feel like it's also tempting, and this even goes back to the element of discipline and kind of staying on track with your larger goal. But at least for me, it can be tempting to follow those flow states late at night, but then it messes up your sleep schedule and then you're not as productive the next day. So I think that's a excellent point, to be willing to take the time and write out like the action plan and the steps and all of the kind of mini thoughts and sub thoughts involved when you kind of go into one of those states. I might have to try that myself for sure.
And also being like really conscious of how your energy cycles work. So, and then aligning like,
Tailored.
yeah, your schedule to those energy cycles.
Right.
Like I don't like to take calls anymore. Like really after noon, my energy starts dropping off, but I have like my initial call at 7 a.m., my morning call at 7 a.m. And then I like to take client meetings like 9 to 12. And that's where I'm going to have my highest
Energy.
Now, sometimes it just like happens that I have to take calls later, but you're only getting 70, 80% of me, and that's dropping off throughout the day. So being conscious of those energy cycles has been like important to me as well.
Oh yeah, absolutely. That one I'm still learning in real time as well, because I think I actually also have a restaurant job right now to help support me while I get
Right.
my business off the ground. And I think that kind of messes with my energy cycles a little bit, because I used to get a second wind kind of around or after dinner time around like 6 or 7, but now I'm usually working at the restaurant during that time period. So I'm having to learn how to kind of harness that and get more done during the day, just so that, because I hit the exact same afternoon slump, and figure out how to reconfigure it a little bit within the confines of my new reality.
Lots of coffee.
Lots of coffee. Yes, absolutely.
What is the biggest thing that you know now that you didn't know when you first embarked on this journey that you wish you knew?
Mm. I even just have one word come to mind immediately. Patience, and more patience, whether that is with myself, a client, a prospective client, the process, what it takes to build a business. And also in this, I would say like the concept of like leaning in, especially to mentorship. Like someone can help give you some guide rails and like some of their wisdom, but it's up to you to actually take that and put it into action. And even when you do that, you still are required to have a lot of patience, because you notice when doors are starting to open for you because you're taking that action that you need to be. But it doesn't mean that your dreams are going to fully come to fruition overnight, and you have to be okay with that if you are truly dedicated to your larger vision. And for the longest time, I really did think that, oh, as soon as I'm brave enough, and that was like my biggest hurdle I would have to overcome to actually put this out into the world, that then things would just be magnetized overnight. And in a sense, they have. Like I've fallen into like a really wonderful community that I didn't know existed. To your point earlier, Denver has this incredible entrepreneurial spirit that it did not when I was growing up, and it's so exciting now, especially after leaving like LA and New York. I was disappointed and I thought that it wouldn't be here, but like leaning into that, realizing there's a lot of opportunities that can come with it, but that patience will be required for the kind of larger goals to unfold.
It's great advice.
Yeah.
What's your definition of success? What are you chasing after?
That's a toughie. I mean, I know what it is to an extent. I mean, fulfillment and just like having like a radiant joy about me, I feel like are two just fundamental characteristics that I want to carry throughout life. And I think also knowing myself and how many things I'm passionate about in this life, that's going to shift, and how that looks like is going to evolve, and I'm okay with that. I always knew I wasn't going to be a one-track minded single career, single business person. There's a lot of ponds I need to dip my toes in. And as long as I'm doing that, and I'm also at the same time allowing projects to be seen all the way through and businesses to like go as far as they can without giving up on them, I'll also be very content with that. Obviously, there are like monetary aspects, like stability wise and freedom wise, and like how I want my kids' lives to look, and like just like a security that I want like them to feel down the line. And even in my own, and because I also love adventure and like to be able to travel and like also like give back and host events and like kind of luxurious and fun opportunities for people in my life that maybe don't have that on their own. Like I just want to be able to serve a lot with like monetary success. So really just like that exploration, adventure, and like knowing that I'm serving people and feeling fulfilled by that is what I want, no matter what shape that takes on.
Well, that's a great mission. It's very inspiring.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Do you have one yourself?
I'd say it's pretty similar. Like it's always been difficult for me to put into a box like exactly what I should do, because it's difficult to say like what is like the purpose of life, you
Yeah.
know?
So abstract.
And yeah, especially when you're like, okay, I feel like the mechanics of the universe, like I can kind of pick my outcomes and like I can have control of my reality. So if that's the truth, then what do I want to accomplish? So for me, I haven't like defined exactly what the path is, but I've tried to like come to a direction, which is like, I just want to have a positive impact,
Yeah.
and as much of a positive impact as I can. So that is like the overarching goal that I use to make my decisions. It's like, is the path that I'm on right now the best use of my productivity and my potential that is accomplishing that goal? And then, okay, I hope it is. And then making decisions in the future that come along, it's like, does this push me closer to having the biggest positive impact, or is this going to decrease the amount of impact that I can have? So right now I just have a direction.
I love that. And I think it's so admirable and also exciting because at least, and maybe you feel this way too, I think when you have like an overarching mission like that, it can help you evade overthinking and falling into that trap. Because then, yes, you can like kind of analyze your individual steps you're taking to see if it aligns with that mission and is like carrying you towards it versus away from it. But I think it makes you realize that it might be harder to miss steps than you think. And if you're
Right.
generally going in that trajectory, then you're doing okay.
And I've kind of just like, I've disciplined my mind to not have a negative outlook on any outcome. Like everything's just a learning process and it's just part of the journey.
No such thing as failure.
Yeah, exactly. It's like the only time you can really fail is if you quit. And it's just like, yeah, having that discipline to change your perception. Like two people can perceive the same event opposite ways. And I think that happiness is a discipline and we have the choice to like perceive our lives how we want. And so it's hard to do all the time, but I try to make the choice every day to have a good day. And like, no matter what happens, like look at the glass half full and as opposed to half empty.
I think that's awesome.
Yeah. If people want to reach out to you and have more questions or interested in your services, where can I find you?
At KG Creative Living on Instagram. And then kgcreativeenterprises.com is my website. And it has all the information about my coaching and kind of goes into more of the details and what the different opportunities are like there. And it also has a couple workbooks so you can download if you're interested in kind of starting the process and, like I like to say, dipping your toes in that pond and just kind of learning more about yourself.
Fantastic. Well, I appreciate you coming out. It was awesome.
Appreciate you having me.
Yeah,
Thank
sweet.
you.
All right. That's it.